All right, let's dive right into this explainer and explore a piece of literature that has absolutely captivated audiences for over 4 centuries. We're talking about Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. But listen, we aren't just going to look at it as some dusty old play about ancient Rome. Instead, we're going to see it for what it truly is, the ultimate political thriller. It's a total masterclass in intrigue, allegiance, and conspiracy that fundamentally asks us what happens when one person pursues too much power and what happens when others try to stop them. Now, what's really interesting here is the core human question posed by the director of the Great Lakes Theater production, which instantly connects this historical text to our very modern anxieties. The absolute genius of Shakespeare's work is that he asks central questions about humanity that honestly never really expire. What makes us tick? How easily persuaded are we? And crucially, can we separate our individual desires from the greater good of a nation? When we watch this devastating tale of Rome unfold, we aren't just looking at history, we're essentially looking in a mirror.
Section 1. Anxiety in Elizabethan England.
To really get this play, you have to understand the man and his specific moment in time. Picture this. It's 1599. William Shakespeare is just 35 years old, and he's writing for a country that is absolutely terrified of a looming succession crisis. Queen Elizabeth I was aging, and she had no heir apparent. She'd even flat out refused to marry, which effectively silenced any official talk of succession. In this kind of climate, uncertainty about leadership bred a very real fear of civil war. Shakespeare's audience was incredibly anxious about what the future held for their entire nation. And the newly built Globe Theatre was the physical space where all these fears were unpacked. In the summer of 1599, Shakespeare's company had just constructed this magnificent thatched roof theater just south of the River Thames. We actually know from a diary kept by a Swiss traveler named Thomas Platter that he witnessed an excellent performance of this exact tragedy on September 21st, 1599. Just imagine sitting in that brand new arena, watching a play about a brutal political assassination, all while your own country is teetering right on the edge of a power vacuum. So the political climate was literally boiling over. Beyond the aging queen, you had powerful, highly ambitious aristocrats like the Earl of Essex circling as potential rivals. And spoiler alert, he'd actually lead a rebellion in 1601. But here's the really tricky part for a playwright. Writing directly about these current events could get you thrown right in jail. Fellow playwrights Thomas Nash and Ben Jonson had been arrested just 2 years prior because their work was deemed seditious. Since speaking his mind could cost him his freedom, Shakespeare had to be clever. He used the ancient history of Rome as a coded mirror, a safe, brilliant way to discuss England's contemporary fears of civil unrest without risking his own neck. Section 2. Compressing history for drama. So, where did Shakespeare get his facts? Well, he avidly read Thomas North's 1579 English translation of Plutarch's Lives of the Noble Greeks and Romans. Plutarch actually compiled these histories way back in the 2nd century AD to illustrate the virtues and the failings of famous men. Shakespeare totally devoured this text, sometimes even borrowing North's exact word choices and sentence structures to find the raw material for his tragedy. But he didn't just copy it, he completely reshaped the whole thing. Look at how this maps out. In actual history, the events surrounding Caesar's assassination and the subsequent fallout spanned 3 long years, and it included 2 entirely separate battles at Philippi. But on stage, Shakespeare takes all of that and shrinks it down into a tight, high-anxiety, 5-day dramatic pressure cooker. He collapses those 2 battles into a single climactic clash. He does this to create a potent hybrid of history, revenge, and tragedy that keeps the audience right on the edge of their seats. And why to do that? Well, by making these massive edits to the timeline, Shakespeare forces us to focus intently on the psychological and moral dilemma of Brutus. Even though Caesar's name is in lights on the title, most scholars and directors view Brutus as the actual protagonist. He's this noble idealist, a close friend of Caesar, who ultimately rationalizes assassination for what he firmly believes is the greater good of the Roman Republic. Shakespeare deliberately sets Brutus apart from the other conspirators to introduce a deep moral ambiguity. In trying to dispatch a tyrant, Brutus inadvertently destroys the very republic he loves. Section 3. A mirror for every era. Now, this is where it gets incredibly eerie. During an 1864 American benefit production, 3 brothers from a famous theatrical family appeared on stage together for the first and only time. Edwin Booth played Brutus, Junius played Cassius, and playing Mark Antony was John Wilkes Booth. In a chilling, real-world parallel, John Wilkes Booth would go on to become an actual political assassin when he murdered President Abraham Lincoln just a short time later.
For centuries, spanning from the 1600s all the way through the 1800s. Almost all of the great leading English actors, like William Charles Macready, absolutely favored playing the noble, conflicted Brutus. During this time, he was seen as the undisputed hero of the piece, the ultimate defender of the Republic against tyranny. But then, the political winds shifted, and so did the play itself. In 1898, theater manager Herbert Beerbohm Tree broke that long-standing tradition. Instead of Brutus, Tree actually cast himself as Mark Antony. Why? Because this production was designed to perfectly coincide with and celebrate Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. Tree wanted to highlight Antony's stirring pro-empire rhetoric. He even hired a landscape artist to paint monumental backdrops, giving the production an epic grandeur that celebrated a sprawling empire rather than a fragile republic.
Fast forward to the volatile rise of fascism before World War II, and overtly political interpretations of the play absolutely exploded. In 1937, Orson Welles created a riveting adaptation for his Mercury Theater. He staged Julius Caesar to directly reflect 1930s WWI anxieties. He cast Caesar as a dictator styled squarely in the mold of Benito Mussolini, while Welles cast himself as the noble idealist Brutus, warning his audiences of the encroaching threat of absolute autocracy. And the text's incredible flexibility continued right into the golden age of cinema. In 1953, it reached massive new global audiences with a star-studded MGM Hollywood film adaptation. It featured powerhouse actors like James Mason as Brutus and Marlon Brando turning in an absolutely iconic performance as Mark Antony, proving that Shakespeare's political thriller was just as viable a blockbuster as any modern script out there. Even in our current century, the play's relevance hasn't slowed down one bit. In 2012, the Royal Shakespeare Company's artistic director, Gregory Doran, staged a production featuring an all-African-born cast. This version overtly likened the character of Caesar to modern African dictators like Idi Amin and Robert Mugabe. The point is, whether you're dealing with 1930s European fascism, 19th century imperialism, or modern autocrats, this play remains an incredibly flexible, highly effective mirror for understanding tyranny.
Section 4. Finding Courage in Captivity.
You know, the colorful Hindu Diwali cards you're looking at are actually hiding an incredible secret. While imprisoned on Robben Island during the brutal apartheid regime in South Africa, a political prisoner named Sunny Venkatrathnam smuggled a volume of the complete works of Shakespeare into the prison by pasting these religious festival cards right over the cover. This contraband book was then secretly passed among the leaders of the anti-apartheid movement, including Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 long years in that prison. As the prisoners passed the book around, each man signed his name next to passages that spoke deeply to him, and Julius Caesar was one of the most heavily annotated plays in the entire volume. Mandela specifically marked these powerful words on December 16, 1979. He drew profound personal strength from Caesar's fatalistic courage. Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once. In the face of overwhelming oppression, Shakespeare provided a profound meditation on the meaning of life and finding real courage in the face of death. So as we wrap up this explainer, I think we can all agree that Shakespeare didn't just write a history play. He wrote a blueprint for understanding power, ambition, and consequence that somehow survives in every single era. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought. If you were the director today, looking at the world right now, whose faces would you show in this 400-year-old mirror?